Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Agency Accelerator Magazine. Today we're thrilled to have Lynette Xanders, the renowned owner and founder of Wild Alchemy, here to share her insights on crafting a killer brief. Lynette, it's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about briefs. I love them, and I think they're crucial to our industry.
Yes, I'm very excited to have this meeting, this podcast, because we write many briefs at the Growth Publisher for each one of our special editions. So having an expert like you to provide feedback, not only for us, but to all the agency owners, is amazing. So to kick it off, can you explain what exactly a marketing brief is and why it's so vital for successful campaigns?
Yes. In short form, it is a tight synopsis of the issue and the opportunity with the critical information that the team needs in order to solve the problem. It's important because there's so much fragmentation these days. Even within an agency, there are silos. There are a lot of companies that have people who work together for a long time, and it all kind of lobs into, oh, you know. And they're like, yeah, I know. But then people know different things. So it's in order to make a team smart quickly, but ultimately to get them to fall in love with the project, because guessing is expensive and spin or do-overs is also really expensive.
That's really good. And we have like agency owners that are just getting started. They've been freelancing to growing their agency to more established ones. So for the sake of those that are just starting and growing, and they're bringing in one or two on board, can you let us know a little bit, when do you write the briefs? When should they write a brief, and why should they write that brief, right?
Yeah.
So you might have like an SEO person or a designer or a content creator. Give us a little bit of insights for them, for those that are getting started, because those that are more experienced, they may already be doing this, but share with us a little bit there.
So and I've also been asked the question, which projects should you write a brief for? And my template is a one-page that you could even handwrite if you needed to. And I think you always do them. And I think you do them as far up front in the process as humanly possible. So if you bring your people together, you bring the information together, you talk about it first, then one author goes and writes the brief. And it's really, this is what I think we should do about it. This is the part of the canvas we need to start on. And then present that or give a briefing to all of the people involved so that it's literally getting everybody on the same page.
So I know in my marketing team, the agencies I've run in the past, and at the Growth Publisher, if we go in for an issue, we'll have a brief. Or if we're going to go do a blog series, we'll do a brief. Or if we're going to do a SEO campaign or a website, we'll do briefs that guide the whole team. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, this is my blueprint. Is that what you would summarize a brief, kind of a blueprint of what we're doing, what we're going to accomplish? Like what goes into this brief that they write?
Well, and I would say there are two kinds of briefs. Same template, but one I would call a mother brief, which is for the brand overall. What are the big business objectives? What does the brand stand for? And what do we need to say? Why do people love it? And then there's a brief for a specific output. If it's a blog series, for example, why the blog series? What is the blog series intended to do? Against what audience? So the brief in my mind is the objectives. It's the why we are doing this, but it's who we're talking to, why they should care about it, kind of why they should believe it, kind of all wrapped up so that all these different company or these different teams doing different outputs for the same brand ladder up to something that's consistent. It has some cohesion. And to one of your earlier points is making sure that they meet the business objectives. We're not doing them just because they're fun to do.
Yeah, so on those two briefs, let me ask you a question. On that bigger brief, the organizational brief, what kind of content you find that generally makes up and the objectives in that brief?
So I have a template I've used for 30 years that I got from Stan Richards at the Richards Group, and it's still the best template I've ever used, and I asked him if I could use it. He said, of course you can. But it's what is the assignment? What do we want to have happen? So how are we going to measure output? Who are we talking to? What do they currently believe? What do we want them to believe? Because 4 years of Purdue and psych, behavior modification, it's you don't tell people to do an action, you have to get them to believe something in order for them to do what you want them to do. So what do they currently believe? What do we need them to believe? And what's the one thing we need to tell them that's going to bridge those two? Why should they believe it? And what is our brand's character? What's our voice?
Very good. So that's the big one. And then, like, you recap the smaller one for project base. What would be included in that one? And you mentioned some already, but just a recap.
And the second one, I think it's the same information, truthfully. But you may append tech specs. You may append, the cadence, how many you're going to do. So, it's still kind of, why are we doing this blog series? Who are we talking to? How are we going to change their beliefs? It's still those same questions, but then you need to append probably the logistics of, when and where and who and how and all that good stuff. If it's just a copy change, I mean, there are tiers of briefs. There's, hey, we're doing this brand new, and we kind of answer everything. We're just making a couple of tweaks, it would still be the same brief template, but if it's just, hey, we need to change the date or the copy or this, that's it, really just an email. But I'll still call it a brief because I said that you have to write a brief for everything.
Okay. Now let's talk about some common pitfalls, right? So we got the organizational brief, we got the project brief. These are guiding the team to work together, to know what they're doing. It helps align with the customer. What are some common pitfalls that you've seen on, creating these briefs and, maintaining the brief as a project's going on?
I think not doing them at all. When I'm called in to fix a company, I'm like, are you doing briefs? And they say no. I'm going to say it's the closest thing to a silver bullet I've ever found. 80% of my clients' problems will be solved by writing a killer brief. So do them. Don't do them in a vacuum. So make sure you're talking to your team and you've got their support. The biggest problem is just phoning it in, just cutting and pasting. And it just becomes this repository for information, but without a point of view. And without an idea of what the team is supposed to do. And then the other is when it's just too technical and it's not inspirational. So I think a brief is to inform, but more than that, it's supposed to inspire.
I like that a lot. So no brief is a big pitfall, right? And then no, I guess you said no vision, would you call it, or no direction?
No
or
point of view.
No point of view. And then you mentioned about having one person write it versus the whole team write it.
Yep.
What is your view on that?
I think the team has to be on board with the general direction. So that's a team sport. Like talking about strategy is a team sport. Writing a brief is not a team sport because everything, I don't want to say gets dumbed down, but it gets dumbed down. You start to, have to compromise on words. And the thing about a brief is, in order to make it inspirational, it's got to be juicy. You've got to use some good language. It's got to be a little provocative. It might be a little, might push the boundaries just a little bit. And it's very hard to do in a team setting. So once the author has a point of view and puts it in a brief, then it's gathering with your team again and kind of going through, this is why I wrote it this way. This is what it's intended to mean. And we have to show it to the client to make sure that they sign off on it so that we have their accountability.
Now, you had mentioned that you have a success story of how you used brief to turn around a project or something similar. Is there one that you could share with us in your career of how that helped you with your clients?
Yeah, I have actually loads, but one that I'll share is, we'll call it a global sporting goods company, shoe company. Hundreds of people working on different areas of the brand, and they were having too many do-overs. So I did a workshop with them, and they said, yeah, we we use briefs. And I'm like, yeah, but if you were using them well, then I wouldn't be here. So pop quiz. Everybody use my brief format. Write down what you think the mother brief is. So I got, I don't know, I just looked at the first 50 and they were all so wildly different that they kind of went, oh, I see the problem. And their audience insights it was just an acronym. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, I don't know, but we use it. Everybody knows what it means. And I said, okay, everybody, what does it mean? And they were like, we actually don't know. It's just this acronym for the audience that we use. So we collectively wrote a mother brief. What does the brand stand for? What do people believe? What do we need them to believe? What do we need to tell them? What do we stand for? And then once we wrote the mother brief together, they could go off and write a brief for the shoes or the golf or the website, kind of other outputs and other product lines or different brands under the mother brief. But they just hadn't found that point of alignment. I call the brief the last place we all agreed. And that's when it falls into
So that's a good example. And my question is, like, audience targeting. How do you ensure you're effectively addressing the brief to the audience you're trying to target? Is that because you mentioned that the sports company, they were having a general audience? How important is defining that audience and getting that right?
I think it's as important as writing the brief. I think it's really hard to be inspirational if you are not talking about humans in a human way. And I know there's a lot of data and that can be somewhat helpful, but I find even if you only talk to two people, there's a quote about, there's a single moment of human emotion is enough to create a masterpiece. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I've yet to be able to create something truly inspirational without talking to people and getting an idea of being able to stand in their shoes and what are they afraid of and what do they believe in and what do they dream about. And I have had clients also say, well, you only talk to two people. That's not research. And I'm like, fine, don't call it research. It's creative development. But the alternative is we sit in the back room and make it up. So I don't know how that's any more valid. So find the one or even if it's just somebody that you know in your real life, but you have them in your mind's eye when you're writing the brief, it's going to be much more relevant, meaningful, and motivating than if you're just talking 25 to 50-year-old, 54-year-old grocery shoppers.
So creating creating personas of the target audience that you'd like to go after.
Yeah, but make them real.
That helps. And make them real. So a little bit about creativity. Let's jump into that because you mentioned about creativity. I imagine a lot of people may be thinking to themselves like, okay, I do have to write a brief, but I get this writer block. I don't know what to include in that brief. I need inspiration. How can you help me get over that? Because I'd love to write briefs for everything, but man, it takes a long time to write those.
If you practice, I can write a killer brief in 20 minutes. And it'll save so many do-overs on the back end. It'll pay for itself, I promise. So it's difficult, but it's worth it, and it becomes far less difficult the more you do it. And I want to say, there's some people who believe that there's a tension between clarity and creativity, and I believe that clarity fuels creativity. To be really clear on the problem, to be really clear, I've got an example of that, to be really clear on what you think we need to do about it. But also, I like to write briefs the first time longhand. I think I get blocked when I start getting in the computer because I start thinking in bullet points. I like to have a beautiful pad of paper and a beautiful pen and sit on a patio with a glass of something nummy, like get myself inspired. And then it's a whole lot easier to write that brief. And people are trying to do it in between meetings at their computer. And I would also find that numbing very difficult to do. So, part of it, just decide you want to get good at it. I've got a book on how to be good at it. But some of them, it's just getting yourself in that state, to use a Tony Robbins, in that mindset of being able to play with ideas and use some juicy language. And if you bring a bunch of paper to that party, you're going to lose. So it's, how do you synthesize everything that you know into This is the nut of it. And if this is all you knew, creative department, then you're not going to go far wrong.
Sounds good. And you did mention you wanted to say something, or you had some story to share with that,
I
or did you already share it?
No, I do. It's a brief. Well, it's Amtrak was a client a long time ago, and I'm giving you examples. I don't have to explain what the client is, but part of it was asking the client the right questions, where they said, we need to sell the train on the West Coast, and we said, every agency they'd had to that point was selling Portland to Seattle because it costs the same amount as driving, and it took about the same amount of time as flying. And we said, do you make any money on this route? And they said, no, we lose money on this route. And we said, okay, where do you make the lion's share of your revenues? Key question. The client said, we make it on long haul. If we get one person to go from Vancouver, BC to San Francisco, we win. And so I framed the problem. I said, why would you spend more time in this box? It takes you longer than it would take to drive. It costs you more than flying, but people are doing it. So I hopped on the train and I just talked to people. I said, why are you doing this? If you could have flown or you could have driven. And they were like, I give myself my undivided attention. I can do anything that I could do on a Sunday except take a bath on the train. So instead of a mode of transportation, we decided that it was a land cruise, that it was a part of the vacation. But that was kind of, identifying the problem is more than halfway toward the solution.
And then you've targeted your audience, and the brief came from that.
Yep.
So let me ask you that, because talking about future trends here and we're getting closer to the end of the podcast, but I know from writing briefs, sometimes I do have writer blocks, but what I found is that ChatGPT has been very helpful to help me write briefs, because I can create the main summary and it fills in the areas around it, and then I can adapt it from there. What is your experience with AI, and do you think that has a big place in brief writing in the future?
I believe that AI is only as good as the prompts that you give it. And if it can help do the menial work, awesome. But I still believe that you can't get it to do the strategic thinking, and you can't get it to do to make something inspirational. So I would say use it to save yourself time, but don't think you can outsource it completely. Like, I think humans inspire humans. And, if you have the thought that it's going to take too much time, at the end of my tenure at a global firm, I had some naysayers at first, and at the end of it, they were like, oh, I get it. We never seem to have enough time to do it right, but we always seem to find time to do it over.
Yeah.
So whatever it takes to get you to write a great brief, cool, but your brain and your heart are going to be most of it.
Oh, those are good. That's a good advice, and I really appreciate. Thank you, Lynette, for sharing such valuable insights today. We've given why write a brief, types of brief, roadblocks that can happen when you write a brief. How do you get rid of the writer's block? Adding creativity, choosing your target audience. So you've shared some super valuable nuggets with those people out there. And then just a little quick shout out. What do you do for your company today? How can people reach to you? How can they get help? Can you share that in the end here?
Absolutely. Jack of all trades now. I'm a strategist, qualitative researcher. So if you need somebody to go talk to your people, I can do that. I write brand positionings and briefs for companies. I do workshops to teach agencies, internal agencies and external agencies, how to think, how to write better. So wildalchemy.com is kind of the business side, and then LynetteXanders.com is for speaking and workshops, which I do as often as I can because it feeds me. This is so fun. I've so enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And for all those listening, we appreciate tuning in. We will have an article published. We'll feature Lynette as an influencer in our upcoming edition of our magazine, as well as in our social media posts. So, Lynette, thank you for your time. Everyone, thank you for tuning in, and we hope you have a happy holidays. Thank you.
Thanks much.